country.
Thank you for that.
Gentlemen, sorry, I beg your pardon. We'll just have to cross over to the Supreme Court. I understand that Justice Maraga is now addressing the courtroom. Remember that the Supreme Court is this morning expected to give directions on a case where the chairman of the IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, is really seeking directions on his role in the verification of results declaration forms. Let's just hear what he has to say about this.
Arguing, tell us what exactly you are seeking.
Counsel, just before you proceed, I have heard you say during introduction that the application is by the first and the second.
Yes.
The motion I have myself is by the second respondent. I do not know whether there is another one.
It's second.
It's second only,
yes.
Not by the first.
Yes, the national
Thank you.
Returning Officer.
Thank you.
Yes. The application is seeking clarification on how the Presidential Returning Officer should go about the functions of verifying the results before announcing the winner, in the sense that in the judgment delivered by this honorable court, one of the criticisms of the National Returning Officer was that he had failed to verify the figures in Forms 34Bs with the figures in Forms 34As. And obviously, the reason why the returning officer relied on Forms 34Bs is because, as we all know, Forms 34Bs are the aggregates of Forms 34As. 34B represents the constituency figures, which is the aggregate of Forms 34As, 34A being for each polling station. So those results are aggregated by the constituency returning officer. But now it will be remembered that 34Bs and 34As are also transmitted to the National Tallying Center. Now this court said that the Presidential Returning Officer should have verified 34Bs against the figures in 34As. So we wanted clarification as to whether the National Returning Officer must verify the accuracy of 34As as transmitted and aggregated in 34Bs before announcing the results, particularly because the Court of Appeal decision in the minor KI case said the results at the constituency, at the polling station, that is 34As, those results are final, which is why in the 8th of August elections, the Presidential Returning Officer relied on 34Bs. So you both upheld the minor KI case, but at the same time proceeded to say that the national returning officer should have verified the contents or the figures in 34Bs against 34As. So we wanted that clarification. And in particular, what is the National Presidential Returning Officer expected to do if he discovers an error in 34As? Is he supposed to correct that error? Or is he supposed just to leave it the way it is, opening the ground for yet another petition, particularly where the error is clearly mathematical or arithmetic? So that's, in a summary, is the basis of this clarification. The National Returning Officer wishes to comply with the judgment of this court and wishes, to the fullest extent possible, avoid any loopholes for petitions challenging the results, petitions that can be avoided. I think I'll leave you to
Paul Mwite, who is representing Wafula Chebukati, the IEBC chair. And like I mentioned before, and as you've heard there correctly, Chebukati is seeking to understand his role in the verification of results. Remember that there's that Court of Appeal ruling that, of course, gave precedence to what would be announced at the polling station. And therefore, he's seeking, some direction on really what his role is with the verification of the Form 34As that, of course, generate the Form 34Bs and then subsequently the Form 34C. So we'll be going back there in a short while. But let me just get the wrapping thoughts of my guests. I'd like you to maybe a comment with regard to that direction that Wafula Chebukati is seeking.
It looks funny. It sounds very interesting because...
Really funny?
Yeah, funny. It's so funny because it's very clear in the Constitution. What is, you should actually be asking, what is the role of the Presidential Returning Officer? And he's the chair of that. And therefore, when he seeks to understand his role, and yet he's the chair, he conducted elections in August 8th. What did he do? Does it mean that he doesn't understand his job? So it looks funny, it looks interesting because why again clarify at a time like this? What is it that he would want to be given? Because I think what he's looking at, he says that he relied on Form 37Bs that were sent to him by the returning officer at the constituency level. Yet
34Bs.
34Bs. I'm saying that because that's gubernatorial, so 34Bs. And therefore now again he says he had those results that were streaming electronically. So it seems to tell us what is really used. So I think this looks, there's a hidden agenda in this.
And I think it's actually hidden because remember, like I mentioned there, the Court of Appeal had given some direction with regard to who should say what with regard to results at the polling center.
Yeah.
And he's seeking to know whether he, as the chair of the National Returning Officer, should be able to clarify and verify the results as per the Form 34As before he generates the Form 34Bs generated.
And I'm mentioning that as the chair,